The following program is brought to you in part by the film Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace.
Welcome to another Leon Charney Report. We have a really eclectic and exciting show tonight.
With the world meeting in Paris this past week to discuss climate change, the Leon Charney Report brings you its coverage of the Convention of International Trade on Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, otherwise known as CITES. This convention was held in Israel in September.
Okay, I'm Dr. Simon Nemtzov. I'm the scientific authority for the CITES Convention. I work for the Israel Nature and Parks Authority here in Israel. And I'm a wildlife ecologist, and I also represent the state of Israel in a number of international treaties and conventions, including the CITES Convention, which is on international trade in endangered species. My university studies were all in the United States, East Coast schools. My doctorate's from Stony Brook in ecology and evolution. And I've been since living in Israel over 30 years already. In wildlife in Israel, it's amazing. We're a pearl in this area. We're a very special country. You go look at our neighbors where things are rare, and here they're common as dirt. Just take, for example, the ibex, which is the wild goat with the big round horns. In Israel, they're very common because we don't hunt them. And you can walk around and see them in many places in Israel. And if you go into some of our neighboring countries that are considered endangered species, there are few of them, they're threatened. Israel has very rich populations. We have tremendous diversity. In the north, we have European populations. In the south, we have African populations of different wildlife. We're a very rich country in wildlife. We were actually chosen to host this country because we submitted a request asking to host this meeting to the Secretariat and to the Animals Committee of the CITES Convention, offering to host the meeting here in Israel. And we were chosen as hosts for the meeting. We're very proud that the meeting's here in Israel. We're very active in the CITES Convention. And we have over 200 people who came here from all over the world, scientists, people interested in wildlife trade issues, who've come here to Tel Aviv. What we're talking about here is delegates who are very much like me. They're government scientists. We're people of science. We care about the wildlife, and I think most of us want to put the politics aside. We're looking at the good of the wild populations. The animals don't know borders. The wildlife populations are in so many countries. Each country here has its own interests of trying to protect the populations. But the idea is that as scientists, we're looking at the scientific ways of protecting them and conserving them. And I think that kind of information and that kind of approach is cutting across the political issues that may separate in other fields.
My name's Patrick Omondi. I'm the Deputy Director in charge of species management and conservation at Kenya Wildlife Service in Kenya. I'm also the Kenyan CITES Management Authority, responsible for species proposals for the country. Kenya is a party to CITES since 1973. And because CITES deal with the regulation of international trade in endangered species, we are very keen in whatever happens on CITES, because the decision that CITES make affect species, particularly those that their trophies are traded globally, like the ivory for elephants, rhino horn, pangolins, and recently now the African lion. So we have a keen interest, and for this particular meeting, it's a meeting of experts that also looks at the status of species and also make decisions on whether they should be listed on CITES appendixes, so that trade in them should not be allowed globally. Hunting is outlawed in Kenya. We banned hunting in 1978. And we believe that hunting wild animals as a country. Our policy do not allow it. One, because we think it's unethical, and we also do have very few numbers. Our country relies on tourism. Wildlife tourism drives our economy. And so we want to see the animals in their natural habitat. So as a country, unlike many other countries in Africa, Kenya do not allow hunting of wild animals. So it is outlawed. And I think we're happy not to hunt.
It's true that an animal that's in a zoo that's just in a cage with a solid concrete it's like a prison, but modern zoos aren't like that anymore. A modern zoo is usually a very important partner for conservation. It works for educating the public about the wildlife, and there are times you go to the zoo you cannot properly see them because the zoo exhibit so much emulates and copies the natural habitat. And when the animals are in their own natural habitat in a zoo, they act naturally, and you can learn more about them. Israel has a very interesting policy that we only allow import of animals that are born in captivity. And this is for all purposes, and this is very unusual in the world. Captive-born animals only, so from one zoo to another. These are not animals that were taken in the wild. They've never lived in the wild. We're not taking them from the wild and putting them in prison. These are animals who were brought up in a zoo or in a captive situation. And this is a very strict wildlife policy we have in Israel. It's for the purpose of education, to have the zoos and to have them maintained properly, but not to go and take them from the wild and put them behind bars.
Thank you. My name is Nir Kalron. I'm the founder of Maisha Consulting Ltd. It's a company that specializes in environmental crime. My relations to this conference is that CITES is the international body of the trade in wildlife species, and part of our work is on the supply side, mostly in Africa, the African elephant, rhinos, African gray parrots and other species, and it's interesting to come here and talk to the scientists and understand how some of the information, some of the things we do on the ground can influence regulations and international conventions such as this one. Our company can help in a few aspects. First aspect is ground zero, as we like to call it. The poaching areas where the wildlife is hit. We apply various techniques with assistance to wildlife authorities in Africa to combat illegal wildlife crime. Another aspect of it is information leading to the supply chains, the trafficking networks that take the wildlife and trade it illegally across seas. And it's an integral part of this situation, of this convention. The science is, in essence, connected to the security. It's no longer something you can differentiate. We are a team composed of effectively former intelligence and special operations, not only Israeli. We have French, American. We look at ourselves as an international company engaged in an international issue of great importance because of the techniques and the capabilities we bring from our former lives. We tackle the problem from a security point of view, looking at it as a criminal, organized crime, counterterrorism techniques, and we apply some of the things we learned in the past positions and towards fighting wildlife crime, which is, by the way, very similar. In essence, you can traffic drugs, you can traffic ivory. It's basically the same mechanisms.
Well, there's a lot of things that Israel as a country and the Nature and Parks Authority as a wildlife specialist have been doing to help with these issues. For example, in the field of international wildlife crime, which is becoming more and more an issue worldwide, it was actually Israelis and a worker from the Nature and Parks Authority who got Interpol to establish Wildlife Crime Unit, and for Interpol to recognize that wildlife crime is an international problem. And this Wildlife Crime Unit has been working worldwide, and now there's a much bigger emphasis on trying to prevent this kind of poaching. Some of the things that have been done in Israel, for example, just last year, an Israeli scientist who's one of the world experts on forensic DNA, we had Kenyan wildlife officials came to Israel, and together we set up a DNA forensic lab for studying ivory poaching in Kenya. So if you find a dead elephant in the field and you catch somebody smuggling ivory, with the DNA you can trace where it came from and actually which particular elephant was where it comes from. It helps for trying to solve the problems from a forensic point of view and to prevent the poaching.
It's a big challenge because they are hunted for their trophy. We have elephants are being hunted for their ivory, for their teeth, and the rhinos are being hunted for their horns. And that's why, as a country, we do not support any trade in the elephant ivory and in the rhino horn, because we see that humankind can do without them. Ivory is not medicine. Rhino horn is not medicine. So you don't need to kill a 7-ton animal just to make rubber stamp, to make a necklace, to make a bangle. So for Kenya, we are totally opposed to the use of wild animal products for cosmetic.
We use from operational techniques on the ground, technology, intelligence gathering, information sharing, coordination, various techniques that make up a law enforcement entity. And our role here is to assist local entities in Africa, mostly, as I said, in gathering more, in having more impact against the poaching side of it and the trafficking side. Our main clients, or our main partners, are the Wildlife Conservation Society, World Wildlife Fund, WWF, and a few other NGOs that are engaged in wildlife investigations. That's the core of our business, and the model is that we partner with an NGO and assist the government. It's a pyramid, and that's usually the model. The private entity, the professional entity with the science and the NGO, with the hands-on people on site, and the government that supports it.
I think if we see the issues that are going on in population trends and climate change trends, I think that things are going to change in the Northern Hemisphere a lot. I think that what's happening is that the world is becoming more aware of the need to have protected areas and to be able to preserve these in the face of growing populations, in the face of climate change. I think that, for example, the way that we in Israel, as a very, very small country that has to live in close proximity to our life, has set up mosaic areas where there are protected areas and there are areas that are urban areas and they're able to meet, is a kind of a model that may have to be handled in many other countries where we don't have huge areas of wilderness that would like in northern Canada or something like that. We have to learn to work with the areas that we have and preserve them and maintain the populations. And I think that and this is the trend that you're going to see more and more in other countries, of having larger populations of people coming into conflict with the wildlife and having to learn to deal with this, and also having to learn to protect more areas to be able to allow the wildlife to exist under these conditions.
My name is Nir Tenenbaum. I'm a doctor of veterinary medicine, and I'm the founder of Wildies.org. Wildies, well, it's a good question. Wildies is a project I started about 3 years ago, after witnessing the fact that technologies have been sent to the field to protect conservation, to protect wildlife, to protect timber, and every time technology has actually failed in the field. That is where, about 3 years ago, when I visited Africa, I decided to leave my background of the defense industry, where I've been for 17 years, and go back to my original passion, which is veterinary medicine, which is wildlife, which is conservation. And Wildies was created to actually bridge the gap between technologies, conservation, and humanitarian needs. So to bring tools that are available out there, which are of quality, or that can actually change the game, empower rangers, and bring them to conservation from the defense industry, from security, and from other sectors. Well, I'm actually bringing my two strong suits. One is, of course, my veterinary background, which is my passion, the form in which I want to change things in the world, and my other side, which is the defense expertise, the defense experience I had for 17 years. The market is filled with on one hand, or let's call them three fronts, essentially. One is the conservation groups. They are searching for solutions to combat what is a crisis, which is a very big problem we're having now, either with rhinos, elephants, and other animals. The second front is actually the donors, who want to bring funds to actually bring solutions to help what is currently going on, but actually their funds are usually go to solutions which are not appropriate enough, or without what we call an ROI, without a return on investment on what they're actually giving, without a fact-based process. And the third is companies, trying to bring companies to conservation, trying to make them understand conservation is not just another market share, and adapt their solutions to help current needs, to help things which are going on already now, not in 3 years, not in 5 years. The main goal is to create a change that will actually change the way things are being done. It doesn't matter if it is by me or someone else. The main problem is that the market is flooded by people who want to market a solution. Many companies, many groups, many individuals go and state, I want to give you this solution. This is the solution. This drone will do this. This system will solve your problem. But I'm coming from another perspective. There is no one solution. I'm not selling anything. I'm not selling a product. I want to change the process in which conservation does things. I want them to do a fact-based process. And you have to have two things which are very difficult to get by chance. One is a document that shows that you are an advocate for conservation, which is my veterinary medicine degree. And the other thing is 17 years of experience in the field.
It's hard to measure success in such a grand project, such a difficult issue, but we have small successes. We have dogs that we trained in ivory sniffing that are catching, that are seizing tusks as we speak. We have rangers that improve their capabilities to treat each other in wounds and save lives. We have rangers that have improved their tactics. We have basically had one major success that was quite public in Central African Republic, where we managed to stop a continuous killing of elephants in a UNESCO heritage site through negotiations, not even through force. And there are various other successes. Some of them are not mentioned because we don't take front row. We usually provide some of the information to an NGO that will lead it into arrests and seizures. I think it's part of the fact that I myself have been active in Africa since 2001, so people know, I have good friends. I worked in the defense industry before. I know governments in Africa, and of course with the creation of Maisha and some of the success and some of the work that we've done, people hear about us, and again, through that triangle of NGO, ourselves and the government, it works well. The NGOs are confident in working with us, which is something that's not trivial to bring together the business side with the NGO side. There's always a little bit of suspicion, natural suspicion between, are these guys want to make money out of the environment, which is not our case at all. Every one of my team is highly committed to this issue. They wouldn't be here if it wasn't. It's one of our main points to be proud of.
We've had a long-term relationship with Israel. We recently commissioned a forensic and molecular laboratory in Kenya. And we have had our experts come to train at the Hebrew University to build the capacity of our staff to run our lab. That forensic lab will be very key in wildlife crime prosecution. And we have a memorandum of understanding between Kenya and Israel in technology exchange, particularly on the use of attack, sniffer, and tracking dogs. And I think that is very key in our anti-poaching effort. We are looking forward to strengthening our relationship again in the area of research and technology exchange with the government of Israel and the Department of Nature, Parks and Nature. I think has been very instrumental in staff exchange and also in building our capacity in terms of making sure our molecular and forensic lab was up and running.
We train mostly in Africa. We specifically want to train in the areas where we have to work. Training in Israel in the desert and then going back to the Central African jungle is a little bit problematic. We do, however, have groups that come to Israel for specialized training, dogs, intelligence training of various sorts, but most of our work is done over there. That's why I'm constantly on a plane, and it's not an easy thing for a family man.
I think Israel have very good toolkits in intelligence analysis. And I think we are looking forward to sharing that toolkit so that we are able to analyze our intelligence to deal with illegal wildlife trafficking. We can deal with how do we stop, how do we prevent poachers from killing the animals before they kill. So we want our law enforcement to be intelligence-led. So we want to set up a relationship with Israel on that regard so that we are able to fight illegal wildlife trafficking that is not confined to Kenya, but is across the globe.
Fighting the Mexican cartels in Ciudad Juarez is a risky business, but also getting shot by Sudanese poachers or just generally Central African incidents that we had is risky. I was on a boat recently on a specific river somewhere in Central Africa, and 3 shots across the bow passed because a soldier wanted to get some money. So he shot at me. There are hazards in this business. To compare them to Mexican cartels, maybe not yet, but it's definitely getting there. And one point to note about this is the more we become counter-reactive to them, the more we arrest poachers, the more we arrest traffickers, the more violent they'll be. And it's a problematic product of what we're doing, but we're aware of it. But what is the option?
The report that was released yesterday, over 700 rhinos have been poached in South Africa. For Kenya, we've lost 3 rhinos to poachers since the beginning of the year. So we have seen some significant change. And one of the reasons why we have seen a reduction in poaching in Kenya is because of the involvement of local community. And also we have various agencies working together. The National Police, the Kenya Wildlife Service, Customs, the ports, and also working with the Interpol and other countries like Israel. We rely on advanced technology to fight poachers and illegal trafficking. So we have seen a reduction last year and continuing this year, and we are just requesting for further support and working together with a friendly nation like Israel. We've been working with the US on border control, and also just use instruments like CITES to ensure that any decision we take do not compromise the survival of any species.
The knowledge is very different everywhere. In each area you have some knowledge because people are doing important work already. There are people who are working on the ground. There are technologies that have been tried everywhere. But each site is so different that you cannot take the knowledge from each site and deliver it just easily somewhere else. South America, for example, has its own problems. For example, the terrain usually is higher. Usually it has broadleaf forests. In Africa, the issue of governance, the issue of the population, the human-wildlife conflict is a different issue. Australia, for example, has much wider areas, but again there, how do you control perhaps human-wildlife conflict? How do you either protect or control the amount of population that you have? How do you perform a survey in such a large area? Or sometimes, you have conservation areas which are small as a city, and some are as huge as a country. So you always have to balance, and the knowledge is very different from place to place, and how you apply it changes. The way I see the future is a way that deals with the mix of issues that affect it. Because we have habitat loss, we have the population growth, we have poaching, we have pollution, we have, of course, wildlife trade. And you have to deal with all these issues. We know that the wildlife situation is being threatened in a very high level at the moment. So while we are lowering demand for wildlife items such as rhino horns, elephant tusks, we need to actually address the crisis now. We have to protect whatever is left, and we have to plan for the future. Because at current rates, we have lost 100,000 elephants from 2011 to 2014, out of 500,000 that are left. So if we go at the same rate and we don't, in parallel to lowering demand, protect what is there and already plan a future plan on habitat control, we will actually lose everything by a decade.
Yeah, the climate change is happening. I mean, it's a fact, and we're seeing it in so many different ways. And it definitely, there's wildlife that are affected. We see it in migration patterns. We see it in animal distributions. We see it in things that are already affected by populations of in the sea. There's evidence going on that animals are being affected by the rate of climate change that's going on. And this will continue. Populations may change their range. They'll move more north, more south, depending on how the habitat changes around them, whether it's the plants, whether it's the animals. They all are going to be influenced by it. This conference is basically a preparation conference for the big meeting, which is going to be in South Africa next year. And this is like the scientific body that prepares the scientific work for the next conference that's going to be in South Africa in 2016. But what I've been hearing from the people is that they're very, very, very happy about the conditions they have here. We're sure to give them a very top-notch, comfortable place to hold the meeting with some good surroundings, some good food, make them feel good so that they can enjoy the hospitality that's part of being Israel. So many people have misconceptions about Israel. Let them come here and see how warm it is, and not just in temperature, but warm in the heart. And we're taking them on field trips to learn about the wildlife here. And we want them to see Israel for a lot more than just the headlines that they read about in their home country. There's people here from all over the world, from South America and Africa, Far East. And they come here and they said, wow, this place is amazing. It's wonderful. Thank you so much for hosting the meeting. We're really happy to be here.
It's a build-up to South Africa. We are hoping some of the decisions here will build up to the standing committee meeting in Geneva in January, and we'll also build it up to South Africa in October, November of next year. So yes, some of the resolutions from here will be useful for preparing for the 17th Conference of Parties in South Africa, which Kenya will be participating fully.
My name is Carroll, and I'm from South Africa, from the Department of Environmental Affairs. It will be 4 decades since South Africa joined the convention, and it will be the 4th time that the conference is held on the African continent. So we are looking forward to hosting people in the city of Johannesburg, where the meeting will take place. South Africa supports sustainable use as part of our conservation policy and our conservation approaches. So therefore we have a regulated system, we have legislation that regulates hunting, and if there's any illegal activities, we also do, of course, enforcement and compliance monitoring to follow up and take the necessary action against illegal hunting. Well, South Africa is a mega biodiverse country, so we have significant numbers of plant species, reptiles, amphibians, mammals, etc. And we of course have the big 5, which a lot of people are familiar with. It's the elephant and the rhino and the leopard, the lion and the buffalo. But then we also have very endemic species, especially plant species, the Cape Floristic region, that people are interested in plant species. So we are the 3rd most mega biodiverse country in the world, next to Brazil and Indonesia. So there's really a lot to see in South Africa. What I can tell you is that in South Africa we have a process ongoing which is all about the ocean economy. We refer to it as the Oceans Pakisa, which is about big, fast results, where we're looking in terms of the ocean environment, how we can develop economy involving the ocean and the sea life that we find in the ocean. So it's all about developing those opportunities for us as a country, and it's a government-led process. Of course, it's very unique with the different the Atlantic Ocean and the Indian Ocean coming together there. So there's a lot of opportunities to be explored. In South Africa, yeah, we have measures to protect sharks. We have the Marine Living Resources Act, which prohibits, for example, the landing of certain shark species. But we do, however, allow for shark cage diving as a tourism activity. but it's very well regulated with only a few operators being allowed to undertake the activity.
Kenya is geographically disadvantaged because we border Somali, which have no government, and we have issues of illegal firearms crossing the country. We also neighbored with Tanzania. Occasionally we have Tanzanian nationals crossing the border, particularly for those elephants that cross the border, Masai Mara, Serengeti, Tsavo, Mkomazi, and Amboseli, and Kilimanjaro. So we have cross-border people from other countries that come to poach. Our law now, we have a new Wildlife Act. They have very stiff penalties if we are caught poaching. We have seen that to be one of the deterrents. That's why we have seen law reduction. If you are caught poaching an elephant and rhino, you can go to life imprisonment in Kenya, and very heavy penalties. And that is acting as a deterrent. And also because there's a lot of money being offered on the trophies, particularly rhino horn and elephant ivory. We get some locals also being used to poach, but they're not paid much because of poverty level. They're not paid because poaching is a chain. There's the local community or these poor people being used to kill. Then there's the person who now act as a broker, and then the exporter and the consumer. So it's a chain, and that's why it requires collaboration of the source country, the transit country, and the consumer countries. We need to work together, and we need everybody to come together so that we are able to deal with the issues of illegal wildlife trafficking.
Israel's been a member of the CITES Convention since 1979. The convention was established in 1973, and Israel was one of the first countries to join. So we've been an active party for over 35 years. Israel actually has a very, very rich diversity of wildlife. In some ways, we're richer than in many other countries. For example, if you look at almost every group of animals, we have a diversity. We have an expert, one of the experts who came to this meeting is an expert, a world expert on bats. He says there are more species of bats than there are in all of Europe. There are more species of bats in Israel, 30 species of bats in our little country. There are 8 species of crows. There are 5 species of wild cats. We have great diversity in every single group because of the meeting of the different habitats and zones in the north, the south, the east, gives us that kind of diversity here. The Israel Nature and Parks Authority was established very soon after the state was established, back in the early part of the state. The state was established in 1948, and in 1955 a law was enacted to protect wildlife in Israel because there was uncontrolled hunting even going on in those days, and the law was called the Wildlife Protection Law. Around the same time they established the new authority, a government authority to control protection of wildlife, to control nature reserves, and that gradually evolved to the point that we have today. It's changed a little bit, but today's authority is in charge of nature reserves, national parks, and national monuments. So places like Masada and Caesarea, which aren't wild areas, are not nature reserves, they're national parks, they also are administered by the Nature and Parks Authority. Well, there's certainly species of wildlife that have gone extinct in Israel. If you read in the Bible, in the Bible that tells stories about bears that were living here, there's lions that were here, and we have some evidence to know almost around what time they lived here. Lions were here until the Middle Ages, until the Crusaders. The bears were here until the beginning. The bears were here until the beginning of the 20th century. There are crocodiles here until the early 1900s also. So these are species that we know more or less when they were extinct. But the Israel Nature and Parks Authority has a policy since its inception to try and reintroduce extinct species, and we've been very successful in a couple of cases that we've tried. For example, there's a species of deer called the Mesopotamian fallow deer, which was exterminated from Israel. In Hebrew it's called a yachmur, and this species is evidence in the Bible that it was one of the kosher animals that was actually used in sacrifices, and it was reintroduced by bringing in some wild animals in those days from Iran, because Israel had relations with Iran. They set up a breeding population in Israel, and they've now been re-released in the wild, and there's a very viable population living in the north of Israel. Same thing with the white oryx, which in Hebrew is the re'em, with the long long horns. And this is also a species that was here, was extinct, as mentioned in the Bible, and now there's a wild population living in the Negev, in the desert areas too. So at the same time as some have gone extinct, the Nature and Parks Authority has worked to try and reintroduce these animals and to establish new populations.
My name is Ohad Hatzofe. I'm the avian ecologist in the Israeli Nature and Parks Authority. I'm part of the science division. Giving the scientific or professional guidance for the conservation of avian species in Israel, and Israel is a very diverse country. We have 540 different species of birds that can be observed in Israel. Of course, not all are common. And our goal is to preserve and protect those species, whether resident or migrating. And as you know, Israel is the core of migration because many, if not most, avian species are afraid to cross large bodies of water, and the Mediterranean is one of them. So many of the migrating birds that flying from Europe, but also Asia, we said the Eurasia species passing on the way to the wintering quarters in Africa through Israel, because this is a narrow bridge or gap before crossing to North Africa. So, and in fact, for example, just to give numbers, the estimation is, according to studies, not sitting in an office, and it's according to radar study that was done in the 80s in Israel, not less than 500 million birds passing over Israel each year. And this is the lowest estimate, some going up to 2 billion birds passing each year over Israel. We have the most crowded skies in the world with birds and airplanes, which is a bit of a problem. For example, every autumn, these days, over 500,000 white storks migrating over Israel. All the western Palearctic population of white pelican, the largest migratory bird in the world, passing over Israel, 40,000 birds each autumn. It's written in the textbooks that if you want to know how many lesser spotted eagles there are in the world, you have to be in Israel because they're all passing here. So we're talking of millions of soaring birds, and of course this is only a small part of the migration because 70% of the birds are migrating at night. So our skies are extremely crowded. You must remember that almost 1/4 of the land of Israel are nature reserves. And also outside the nature reserve, we try to protect as much as possible. For certain species, we are operating what we would call feeding stations or with supplementary feeding as vultures and eagles that need to feed on carcasses. Or for the white pelicans, each bird consumes depends how hungry it is, but it can take up to 2 kilograms of fish a day, although usually the average is less than 1 kilo, but sometimes they didn't feed for a few days. So every year, the Israeli Nature and Parks Authority supply with over 150 tons of fish. And this is to reduce the conflict with fisheries, but also with the aviation. 3 years ago, one F-15 fight jet collided with 3 pelicans. So we try to manage we all need to survive, whether human and birds. So there is food, but you have to supply it in the right places to prevent conflicts. Israel is a heaven in regard on numbers, although it used to be much better, because with all the protection, we faced extinction or some species are endangered. But for example, Israel is a member of other conventions, not only CITES. The Convention of Migratory Species, there is one agreement called Raptors MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. On that, it's to protect migratory birds of prey. In this Eurasian African agreement, there are 80 species of raptors. More than half of them occur in Israel. So you can understand that Israel is very rich in some are resident, others are only passage, as the honey buzzards and the lesser spotted eagle. But we lost quite many species of birds within the 20th century, and that was mainly due to 2 factors. The introduction of the modern rifle in the Middle East in the World War I caused the extinction, as Dr. Nemtzov mentioned earlier, the brown bear and some deer, but also birds, large birds being shot. The Israeli Nature Parks Authority have a joint wildlife hospital with the Safari Ramat Gan. 14% of all birds of prey that arrive for treatment in the Israeli Wildlife Hospital, we're talking about over 1,000 birds per year, 14% are shot. 22% of all the lesser spotted eagles that are migrating through Israel and being treated medically were shot. It's mainly in the autumn when the migration pass over Lebanon and Syria, and they fall, those that survive and fall luckily in Israel, although not all of them we are able to rehabilitate. So in Israel we have many birds of prey, many species, eagles, vultures. We used to have more, some extinct, but they are still facing a lot of problems as persecution. The other main factor to persecution is poisoning. And it's a worldwide problem, whether it's secondary poisoning or intentional poisoning. For example, in Africa, in recent years, there are mass poisoning of vultures. And you ask yourself, why to poison vulture? Vulture eat carrion. In fact, vulture prevent the transmission of rabies or anthrax. The problem that poachers are afraid that by the vultures, the rangers would track them. Because vultures, when you shoot an elephant, or in Israel, an ibex, the vultures are learn to follow the hunters. So now in Africa, and luckily, I hope not in Israel yet, poachers poisoned vultures, and there were cases of 400 and 600 poisoned vultures in northern Namibia and Botswana. So it's affecting our vultures as well. And also in Israel, some of the shepherds use poison, which is illegal, of course, and we try to fight it. I think the way the Israeli authorities, the INPA, tackle it is different than the rest of the world, because we are not fighting against the poison directly only. We're also trying to control the predators and the pest species, not by culling them, but by reducing the carrying capacity, the artificial, because there are a lot of carcasses from the livestock herds around, and then it's caused the propagation of wolves, hyenas, foxes, jackals, and in Israel there are numerous, luckily, but in some areas too numerous. So we don't fight the farmers, we don't fight the wolves, we control the food source, so to reduce the motivation for poisonings. First of all, there is a lot of collaboration and exchanging of knowledge. As we can learn from others, we can teach others. Personally, part of my work is a member of international work groups for conservation, especially birds of prey, but also pelicans and other species, as to how to control invasive species. So we do expose our experience and knowledge, but we learn from others as well. I think that Israel is quite leading in some of the measures of what I would call active management, which means when enforcing the law itself is not enough, then you have, as I said, with vultures, we have feeding stations, but we also have breeding centers to restock or reintroduce species. Most of the things are being implemented elsewhere in the world, but each place has its technique, and our obligation is to share our knowledge. This is science.
Climate change is happening. We see the evidence in so many different ways in the world. The world's populations of animals are being affected by this climate change. We see it in migratory bird patterns. We see it in distribution of animals, and this will continue to happen as the climate continues to change. There's no doubt that it's going on. Israel, as a major route for migratory birds, is a place where we're actually influencing or being influenced, and we see the different dates that animals are coming through. The birds are migrating, patterns are changing as the climate changes, definitely.